Hey y'all, so another spotlight today. We have Prowler. He's an absolute blast. I also want to call out that Prowler was a collaboration between one of our veteran designers, who most recently did White Tiger, and one of our quest designers, so full credit to both. Anyway, moving on, just touching on the stats as usual, we have, I believe, a little bit lower than normal health here, but pretty solid prestige. If you want to keep an eye on that, it's around the same territory as Spider-Punk's. Moving on to the attributes, survivability of 3. Prowler has a little bit higher than normal armor and does have access to both Falter and Taunt to keep him alive, but doesn't really have much else going. No regen, no crit resist, etc. About middle. Damage of 4, this is no joke. Prowler's ruptures get really, really big. There's a skill cap to lining things up. You have to kind of understand the flow of the fight to manage your opponent's power as much as your own. But once you get that down, the payoff is really, really good. Ease of use 2, this kind of goes with what I just said, right? Like learning to manage all of Prowler's different effects and their conditions and when they pause can be a little bit daunting. I personally find it very fun and I think it's worth it, but I will also admit that during the Prowler playtests internally, there was a fair number of, wait, no, I did something stupid. Let me start over. This isn't really an accurate representation of his damage. That happens a fair amount with different players, but I remember it distinctly about his process. So just be aware of a learning curve on the way in. Utility of 4 is definitely fair. We already talked about Falter. That itself is strong. He has 3 different immunities, Falter, Bleed, and Incinerate. A very unique form of power control, and just a few other things tucked away in his kit. Very strong utility champ. And then Defender Strength 3.5. So it's a month of 2 3.5s. Neither Prowler nor Spider-Punk should make giant splashes in war especially, or even really in battlegrounds, but they have enough tricks that you are going to want to read through their kits so you don't get surprised, because both of them can punish mistakes very quickly. Moving on to strengths and weaknesses. Prowler is a very good anti-evade counter, similar to how Photon counters miss, both with her mediums all the time, and then has access to a blanket miss counter in pure light form. Prowler has medium attacks that can't be evaded, and has access to a pursuit effect that turns off evades entirely. Offensive miss. Prowler's Falter is mostly offensive. There is one exception that we will talk about later, but this is very good for finding openings for additional combos or heavies. Like I mentioned earlier, Prowler also has a really unique method of power drain where it doesn't keep the opponents off their specials, but it does drain any remaining after they throw it, which is really good for keeping them off the next special attack. And like the spotlight says, really good against power efficiency, whether from nodes or from mutant kits. That said, the power drain is a large part of what holds their kit together, so immunity is really going to slow you down. The same way that the miss is a strength, anyone who turns it off is going to be a bit of a problem. And like we said, Prowler only has a few methods of sustainability, one of them being the higher than normal base armor, so anyone who gets around that is going to hurt him pretty badly. Moving on to the abilities themselves, Prowler is immune to Bleed and Incinerate, and has extra block proficiency during the opponent's special attacks. This is generally good, right? It's a relatively rare set of immunities, especially in tech. Not unique, but rare. And then block proficiency during the opponent's specials is good in general, against mutants in particular, and also against a certain skill champion that applies bleeds through block. Prowler is also immune to Falter and has increased ability accuracy. Yes, that does catch Domino. Prowler does not benefit from Collar Tech. he just gains extra critical damage rating for each rank. This is because his kit is tuned around playing a certain way and lining up the opponent's power with your actions. Collar Tech gets in the way of that, but we don't want you to feel like you have to turn it off when you're playing him versus somebody else, so it just disables it. Moving on, medium attacks are non-contact and cannot be evaded, right? So you're going to have to watch out for this when Prowler is on defense. On offense, it means his mediums can't be parried by most characters, as well as not being able to be evaded. And then when Prowler would land a critical hit, he instead inflicts a Rupture passive, dealing the critical damage the hit would have dealt as physical damage over 1 second. This having a duration doesn't interact with a ton of abilities in the game, right? Like, this technically means that it's not reduced by Serpent's reduction of instant damage, but I would not recommend using him against Serpent, but keep an eye for that kind of clause in the future. But it does mean that these effects can be paused, so look for that later in the kit. Now for his falter, his second medium inflicts a falter for 3 seconds, which is paused during his special attacks and cannot be reapplied. And then if it causes a miss, it goes on cooldown for 10 seconds. So a lot of things going on here, right? One of the things this means is that you can finish a combo with a medium, inflict this falter, they hit into you, it will go on cooldown, but that's fine because you're going to hit into them again with like a medium, light, medium or something, and then they'll probably hit into you again, and then you can still land another combo. 3 seconds is a long time in MCOC, and you can use this to do some very long combo strings, which will allow you to get to your own specials and push the opponent to theirs, and generally have better control over the fight. It being paused during Prowler specials means that you can throw a second medium immediately before a special. You'll get the benefit of the SIG ability for the falter throughout that whole special. The SIG increases crit rating while the opponent is faltered. And then at the end of that special attack, you can just wait. They can come in, try and hit you, and you get another free opening. So very, very strong offensive miss. The cooldown text isn't to punish you, it's more to make sure that if you don't benefit from the falter, if you apply it and then don't use it to create an opening, or if the opponent doesn't play ball and just backs off, that you still have access to it a lot more quickly, right? If Prowler's special attacks would be punished, he inflicts a falter passive for 1 second. This is mostly a defensive ability, and definitely a bit of an annoying one, but there are some places where it will matter on offense. Prowler's various effects don't work through block, so I wouldn't recommend ever intentionally doing that, but this does mean he has a certain amount of safety if you feel like you need to try and risk throwing a special and it might be blocked. This means that you have that miss at the end of it, right? So that's kind of a little bit of utility for something like Encroaching Stun, right? Anything that's telling you to throw specials when it might not be a good idea, this could save you. And then while the opponent is faltered, they're more aggressive. Just a bit of AI bias there. Power creep. After the opponent activates a special, the rest of their remaining power is drained, and you inflict a power lock passive for 1.5 seconds after the final hit of the attack. Right? So this means that you can bait out a special, get them to 0, and then punish it however you want without pushing them back up. Right? There are a lot of different things you can do with this. You can use it purely for tempo and just land hits on the opponent that don't give them power. You can use this to throw a heavy, which we'll get to. You can use this to medium and get a falter up so that you have even more time before you do anything else. This basically just means that there's yet another thing keeping the opponent's power low, right? For every 1.1% of the opponent's max power that is drained or burned, gain 1 power creep charge. And then when Prowler activates a special, those power creep charges are converted into Fury passives. They're relatively small and short Furies, but they are paused during special attacks, and you can get up to 30 of them, so they get pretty chunky at that point. This is really the core thing to learn with Prowler, is trying to push the opponent as close to the next bar of power as possible without sending them over it, so that they have a bunch of power left when they throw a special, you gain a bunch of power creep charges, and then you get these Furies. And ideally you want to line that up so that you get these power creep charges, then throw the Furies, then immediately get power creep charges and throw another special on top of that, so that you can pause whatever Furies you had left over from the last one, because you probably won't have hit the max just yet on either of those specials, right? That's where the damage in short fights really comes from. We'll get to longer fights later. Heavy attacks. Landing a heavy attack against an opponent with 0 power causes the final 4 hits to inflict an Incinerate debuff, dealing not a lot of damage over 20 seconds. So, like we talked about earlier, the power lock after your opponent's specials makes it really easy to land this heavy after a special with them at 0 power, right? If it's an easy special punish, then just throw it right away. They'll be at 0 because they'll have been drained down to it. If they're not right next to you for you to throw the heavy, then you can just punish with the medium, go into medium, medium, land the falter. They'll still be power locked. And then now they will try and hit into you because of the falter, and you can throw your heavy with them still at 0. Like the Spotlight says, if all of that fails and you just can't punish their special at all, you can just wait and parry heavy, right? But looking for this is a really important part of his kit because of this second line. If a Personal Rupture expires on an incinerated opponent, you get bonus damage, right? So you're going to want all of those ruptures all the time. That's the core of your damage, but if your opponent is incinerated when the short ruptures end, you get even more. This isn't necessarily the largest part of his damage, but it is a very significant boost. Special Attack 1. So on activation, you gain a very long pursuit passive. This just turns off evade. Think of it like just that part of true accuracy, or like a cousin to vigilance, which turns off miss, right? Opponents just cannot evade. It's not ability accuracy, it's binary. The final hit inflicts a taunt debuff for 4 seconds. It's nice and short, so it's not necessarily going to be a major part of Prowler's sustainability via the built-in 40% weakness, but throwing a special attack that knocks them down and applying a taunt is usually a pretty decent way to get them to throw their special. And like we talked about earlier, one of the key things with Prowler is trying to push them as close to the next bar as possible without pushing them over. So this last line, that the Special Attack 1 does not grant power to the opponent, is going to be important to that, right? Because you don't need to plot out exactly how much power they're going to gain from your combo, and then also figure out how much damage or how much power they're going to gain from the special one, and hope it doesn't take them over a bar. No, you just push as close as you possibly can to the next bar of power, throw the special one, it grants them none, taunts them, they throw it, you get your power creeps. It significantly simplifies his loop there. The special 2 is your damage cash out, right? The first hit refreshes and pauses all personal ruptures until the final hit, so that counts all of your little 1-second ruptures from when you would have landed critical hits. The more crits you land with Prowler, immediately before and during the special 2, the more paused ruptures you have, right? And if a rupture only lasts 1 second, if it's paused for a 5-second special attack, that means you are getting 500% extra damage out of it, right? Now, I'm not saying this special 2 is exactly 5 seconds. I don't remember off the top of my head, but it's close, right? You're getting a really big damage boost from pausing any rupture with this. And then each hit in the special 2 is also going to inflict a small rupture for 1 second, like we just talked about. Don't look at this as just this small amount of damage. Look at this as this small amount of damage every second from the point of that hit until the end of the special, and then this damage again after the special ends. When you combine that with any crits you land, this is really, really good. And again, all of these numbers you're seeing throughout the kit are then boosted further by the Furies from Power Creep. So this is the floor of what they do, even with the pause. I'm digging into this because I've already seen some speculation that Prowler's damage looks low. If you've been thinking that, I promise you it's because you haven't really clocked how all the red numbers come together yet. Give him a chance, he has plenty of damage. So moving on, we have the Special 3. This is very much true to form for the same person who designed Shocker and Silk. The Special 3 is kind of your limit break attack, right? It's going to just let you go beyond what would normally be possible in the rotation and do something really cool once, right? Prowler overcharges his gauntlets until the end of his next special. So you get all of these benefits until the next time you throw a special. You get an additional 50% combat power rate, but cannot activate special 2 or 3. So this is going to let you fill up your bar, but you will only be able to throw special 1, right? But when you finally do throw special 1, if you fully filled up the bar, you'll have a special 2 ready immediately. Power creep charges do not get removed on conversion, which means that any charges you get from baiting out specials while you're building to 3 bars are not going to be converted when you throw that first special 1. So you can get 30 free Furies and then get 30 more. If you play your cards right, you can get up to 60 of these Furies because new Fury passives don't count towards the cap. Now, because this only lasts until the end of the next special, this only works once. You can't chain a bunch of different specials and cheese out like 90 or 120 Furies. It is capped, right? But going from 30 to 60 and very quickly following up a special 1 with a special 2 with all of those Furies will end the vast majority of fights. Even if it doesn't, you are doing a ton of damage. Additionally, the opponent gets a 100% power efficiency passive for 30 seconds, meaning that in that whole time you're building up power to be able to throw your own specials. They are just constantly giving you as many power creep charges as possible. Because for somebody other than Prowler, this would be really, really dangerous, right? Because, hold on, I'm trying to gain power while they're not losing any, then that means I can't bait out specials. No, it's Prowler, so every time they throw a special, they are drained to 0. But the 100% power efficiency passive means that you get credit for all of the power they have towards your power creeps. So this is really, really good for that final big cash out, right? You build 2-3 bars after your special 3, you do a medium with your falter on cooldown into a special 1. The falter is paused during your special 1, and therefore you have increased crit rating from the SIG, which we'll get to. The opponent is more aggressive, and then after you throw the special 1, you still have all your power creep charges, so they try and hit into you because you're still faltered. You throw the special 2, get 30 more Furies, finally using up your power creep charges, and because they're still faltered, you apply more critical hits during that special 2, inflicting more ruptures, all of which are paused and boosted by your 60 Furies until the end of it. It is a very powerful cash out. And then moving on to the signature ability. We've already talked about this a few times, but while the opponent is faltered, Prowler gets extra critical rating depending on his SIG level. This is just going to allow you to land more of those 1-second ruptures that replace your critical damage that you would have dealt, right? This does mean that I would probably change my stat focus on Prowler when I duped him, right? An unduped Prowler, I think I would want to run crit rate to just have that up all the time. Once Prowler has a decent SIG level, you're going to be chasing falter uptime enough anyway that I think you would probably trade out the crit rating just due to diminishing returns, and then move that stat focus over into something else like critical damage to boost the ruptures more directly, right? But there is a bit of a sliding scale there. You may want to do some work on Aunt May with the diminishing returns calculator. And then the third bullet, while Prowler has at least 30 Fury effects, his special attacks are passively unblockable. This isn't going to come up too often, but it does work really well with the special 3 rotation that we just talked about, because you throw that special 1 with 30 power creep charges, and then your special 2 is going to be unblockable when you throw it, because you have all of these Furies, right? That means that even if they don't hit into your falter, or if you don't have the falter on cooldown, you're still going to be able to land that special 2 and make the most of all of those relatively short Furies. Moving on to Synergies. I'm skipping over a few generic ones, but we have Caped Crusaders with Gladiator, Magneto House of X, and Moon Knight, where the special 2 grants a short Fury buff. Nice for all of these characters because they have decent special 2 cash outs. Showing the Light with Spider-Man Classic. If the opponent is not faltered, then Prowler has a 20% chance to evade basic attacks while not blocking. Not something you're going to want to rely on, but a nice little bit of safety. And then Spider-Man Classic. For each stack of webbing on the opponent, the special 2 deals 10% of attack rating as a burst of physical damage. Reminder that Spidey's special 2 also puts a very large physical vulnerability on the opponent, so this is going to get magnified by that. Parallel enemies with Miles Morales, White Tiger, Electro, and Vulture. Prowler and White Tiger get a cruelty passive when punishing the opponent's specials. For Prowler, this increases his rupture damage. For White Tiger, this increases the damage of those crits that she lows landing off of her own precision. Miles increases the miss chance of his spider camo by 35% flat, which is doubling its base chance. So now you have 70% chance to miss against non-unblockable attacks. Still not something you can absolutely rely on, but that much better. Electro triggers his static shock when attacking. It's only at 50% potency, but this is a large boost to his damage output, especially if you've managed to get some shocks on you. And then Vulture gets immunity to Nullify, which, as we've talked about before, tends to come in handy. And then as a pair to Spider-Punk's Splitting Heads synergy, Prowler also has this, where Prowler gets access to the pre-fight, granting immunity to reverse controls, but that inverts them for the whole fight. Makes it a little bit harder than normal, like we talked about with Spider-Punk, but also means you don't have to switch back and forth. You're just permanently inverted for the whole fight. And then Spider-Punk's side of this one is that whenever a Mystic opponent gains a non-instant power gain effect, they also are inflicted with a personal rupture debuff. Now, the reason this is restricted to non-instant is that there are a number of Mystics that just gain power instantly all the time. White Tiger and Longshot literally do this on every hit. This would not have made sense. And before anyone says, well, you should have just done that, and then he just would have melted White Tiger and Longshot. No, then the synergy would have been balanced around White Tiger and Longshot and would have been bad for everyone else. So that's why this is here. It's not going to catch that. It's not going to catch Mystic Dispersion, but it is going to catch any power gains that come up on Mystics that tick along, right? So Mordo would be an obvious one. Anything like that, this helps. We already talked about stat focus a bit, but I will touch on relics here. The obvious two are Sentinel and Green Goblin, right? Now, Green Goblin is at its best when it's landed attacks that are doing the power draining, so that doesn't apply to Prowler, but there are a few abilities and runes in there that will help him out. And I think it can still be worth it, simply because the Green Goblin relic has fewer targets than the Sentinel relic. For some people, it's going to be the right choice. If you don't have the Sentinel relic's other targets, though, the fact that this allows your Incinerate to last longer and generally be better is definitely going to help you out with keeping it up and getting that extra explosion damage on your expiring ruptures. So those are definitely the two that I would start with. But that's Prowler. Like I said, a lot of fun to play, very powerful character, good damage, good utility. Highly recommend you check him out. I don't think that the skill ceiling is going to be too big of an issue, so I'm not trying to scare anyone off of it, but I do think that you should be aware of it on the way in, so that you are not thrown off. Anyway, hope y'all enjoy him, and until next time, thanks so much for watching, and take care.